As the time of this recording, Cowboy Bebop has now turned 25 years old, and the show has hit its 25th anniversary. It's been 25 years since Cowboy Bebop was aired. The show was released back in 1997, but it didn't came out with the English dub yet. Didn't come out to America until 2001. This was the anime that was so unique. This was the anime that got people into anime, along with Dragon Ball Z, along with Sailor Moon, along with Gundam Wing, along with so many other classic animes throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. And that show is none other than Cowboy Bebop.
Spike Spiegel, who's voiced by the great Steve Blum in the English dub, which, by the way, the English dub, in my opinion, is superior and one of the few dubs that almost universally is viewed as superior. The character of Spike Spiegel is an amalgamation of many different people in classic film. Clint Eastwood, for one, Bruce Lee. He practices Bruce Lee's fighting style, and you can see it quite often in the show. In the first episode of the show, Asteroid Blues, you see Spike practicing that fighting style, but he's also a very lazy, sleepy guy who really likes to just lay around and eat noodles. But what's so good about this character is his past. And from episode 1, before the opening credits even air, you see a little glimpse of that past, and you realize it's going to add a lot of weight to the show. Weight that you're going to carry. If you haven't seen the show, you won't get that. But for those of you who have, he has this epic, depth-filled past with this guy named Vicious, the main antagonist of the show and the polar opposite of Spike. And whenever these guys clash, it's just, it crying, like I cry. Tears, okay?
Cowboy Bebop was by far one of the most uniquest and one of the most greatest animes of all time, and it's just by far one of my favorite TV shows in general. One of my all-time favorite animes out there, and just one of my favorite animes in general. This show was a show that got me into music, that got me into the liking music, mainly with jazz and other things. And it was a show that got me into art. And it was a show that got me into filmmaking and film noir in the first place. And it was a show that I just overall just really liked as a kid, even though that I was technically a little bit young. I think when I was only about 5 or 6 years old. This show was way ahead of its time. This show was something from the 90s and from the early 2000s that was just so unique. Not just with its animation style and with the great music, but also with its characters. The story is about 4 bounty hunters that are trying to survive by doing their job as bounty hunters, hunting bounties and getting rewards, while at the same time they become a broken family, and we do get to learn more about them. The story basically focuses on these characters. Spike Spiegel, who is a cunning and yet skilled bounty hunter, a mix between both Clint Eastwood and Bruce Lee, which that was overall pretty cool. He used to be a part of a crime organization known as the Syndicate, but give up that life of being a part of the Syndicate by faking his own death so that he could run with the love of his life named Julie, which we will get into later on. And then he and Julie were no longer together anymore, and Julie dies, or that's what he thinks at first. And eventually he becomes a bounty hunter and now takes a life as a bounty hunter. Then we also get to focus on Jet, a former police officer, a former detective, now turned bounty hunter, who is basically like a father figure to the Bebop crew and makes sure that they both try to get, that the Bebop crew tries to get along very well, even though they don't really get along well at times. But Jet is always there for them, even cooking some meals and just helping them out with some bounty missions, and yeah. Then we also have Faye Valentine, a sexy, badass woman who was in cryostasis for far too long until she woke up, which we'll get into that later. And she basically becomes like this badass assassin and now turned bounty hunter, but has a bit of an identity crisis and a bit of a gambling problem, and is also having problems about finding out her past. But we will get into that later on in this review. Then we also got Radical Ed, or basically just Ed, who is a skilled hacker and has like this mumbo jumbo crazy insaneness. And then we also have Ein, a smart dog. The show overall has a really great amount of characters, but one of my personal favorite characters in the show is Spike Spiegel. Spike is calm, he's collected, he's chill, he's just a guy who is just chill, and he's just sitting there just eating bell peppers and beef and noodles. Yep. And also he's doing his best to catch bounties, and he's just kind of having fun to catch bounties. But underneath that, there's more to his character than just catching bounties and just being a calm and collected guy eating bell peppers and beef and noodles. He proves to be more than that. That wasn't until in episode 5 we learned more about Spike's past. We learned more that he used to be part of a criminal organization known as the Syndicate, and we also learned more that he fell in love with a girl named Julia, and he faked his death when he wanted to be with Julia, but then something sad happened, tragic, and Spike will later live a life as a bounty hunter and will join the Bebop crew and will later meet Jet. Is by far one of the most developing characters I've ever seen. He has by far one of the most simple and tragic backstories of any fictional character I've seen, let alone an anime character that I have seen. It's just absolutely tragic. And I think that the creator of the show does a really amazing job with telling his backstory, especially when we get a first glimpse of Spike and his origin story before the theme plays. It's just, yeah, we don't find out more about it until episode 5. And in episode 5, that one is by far the greatest episode out there of Bebop, where we learn more about Spike's past. You see that black and white tragic backstory surrounding it, and as we go further on to the series, we start to piece all the puzzles together one by one, and that's what I really like about Spike. His tragic backstory was a bit of a mystery, and we don't get to know that much more about it until later on in the series. And what really made me like Spike is basically his personality. Yeah, he may be a bit snarky and cunning, and he's pretty much chill. And his fighting styles is pretty awesome. A mix between both Clint Eastwood and, of course, Bruce Lee. But we see him caring more for others and caring more for Julie, including for this guy in the episode where he basically was training this guy for some fighting skills, and then the guy gets caught in the middle of trouble, and it's just such a tragic episode. And one of the most saddest things that ever happened in this episode was that Spike went to see this girl who is in need of eye surgery to replace her old eye with a fake eye, mainly because of how we see Spike of how he lost his eye and how he replaced his eye with a fake one. And yeah, and in this scene we don't get to hear him say any words. We don't hear him say anything. We just see him being devastated. We see him being silent. Spike is often depicted as calm and collected and a carefree person, although he does still care for people that is involved in his life, even though that technically he has no life, and he doesn't have Julia, he doesn't have any close friends around him. He basically has no life at all, and he basically has no one. Well, that wasn't until when he had the Bebop crew, when he had Jet, when he had Faye, Ed and Ein. He does get along well with some of the Bebop crew, although there are times where he does butt heads with one of them, mainly with Faye. And yeah, I heard that there are a lot of people saying that Spike wants to die and that Spike is afraid of death at times, and it's more of both. He does have these human emotions like the rest of us do, but at times whenever there is a suicidal mission that he's willing to take the risk, he's willing to take the risk. And sometimes when there's a bounty, like with that penguin type guy, there are some moments where he could have problems with that. There are moments where he does have some problems with catching some bounties that are hard to catch. There are people who are saying that Spike wants to die. I don't think that's the case at all. There are moments where Spike sometimes is willing to take the risk, especially for his encounter with Vicious at the church in episode 5. There are moments where he does take that risk. In that scene where Spike is falling to his certain death, you can see that the camera is showing the reflection of his fake eye, the one that he got after the incident where he faked his death and had to get eye surgery. You can definitely see that this eye reflection, this is alluding to the fact that Spike is being haunted by his past, and that he's trying to escape from it. He's trying to run away from it. But no matter how many times he tried to run away from it, the past always haunts him, and it refuses to stay buried. And in the series finale, we see that Spike couldn't take it anymore. We realize that he can't escape his past, and now he has to face his past. He has to overcome it by facing it. Faye is by far one of the most badass female anime characters, and one of the most badass females in pop culture and in entertainment history, and she's by far one of my favorite characters throughout Cowboy Bebop, alongside with Spike. She is absolutely pretty cool, and what makes her character so cool is basically her past and her personality. Her past that includes about her time before the events of the series, and we also know that after the accident that she had, she went into cryostasis, and after when she was recovered from cryostasis and hasn't aged, and she doesn't recognize the world around her, and the world doesn't recognize her either. She doesn't recognize the world that she lives in anymore. She realizes that the world that she used to live in is no longer the world that she lives in anymore. The world that she lives in now is pretty different, and she doesn't know her past. She can't even remember what happened to her, and she tried to ask these things. Who is she? What happened to her? And, you know, basically everything. Her personality is that she has a bit of an identity crisis, and also has some gambling issues, where basically she has a gambling addiction, and oftentimes she would bet on racing horses or racing dogs, or just basically betting on any riding races in general. And basically, yeah, she has a lot of issues. And she's also a badass bounty hunter, and she's absolutely pretty wonderful. And just, yeah, she's just overall one of the best badass female characters I've seen in anime. And I really like how well written she is. She's not like a typical badass that basically is just so cool and so attractive type. She's proven to be more than just that, and that's what I really like about her character, is that she has flaws. She has to overcome these flaws, and she also has this gambling addiction and has this identity crisis, and she's trying to overcome it, but sometimes it gets the best of her. And that wasn't until when one day she finds a videotape, and what was that videotape of? Her past, everything before the crash, and her childhood. Then we have Jet. Jet Black being by far one of the best awesome supporting characters ever in Cowboy Bebop, and by far pretty badass. he's basically a bounty hunter who has like this following on the rules book type of guy. And yeah, that's because he was a former police officer who basically had some trouble with their how do I put it? Their moral code, and basically he left the law system because of how corrupt that the law system really is. And even though that he's no longer a cop, he still has those morals of being a good cop. He still has those morals of him being just a cop in general, and still having those morals of being a cop, even though that he's no longer a cop and he's a bounty hunter. And he's also the maturest of the bebop crew, and he also tries to make sure that the bebop crew does get along really well, although many times it doesn't work that well. And well, yeah, he tries to do his best to settle the bebop crew into being this group that they could work together with, although it doesn't work that well. And yeah, Jet is kind of like the father of the bebop crew. He's basically the responsible parent, cleaning up their messes and everything like that, and also helping out on bounties and everything throughout. Then, of course, we have Ed and Ein, who are supposed to be the comic relief of the show. And unlike the others, they both seem to get along really, really well. And unlike the others, they don't let their past and future afflict on them. And they are not traumatized by their past and future. And they don't really question around it that much. There are people saying that Ed is a boy and that Ed is a girl. Although sometimes there is some confusion about Ed's gender. Another thing what I really like about, besides the characters, is the world building and the stories surrounding this series. It feels like that you are with these characters in their journey, and it feels like that you want them to get better. You want them to overcome their fears and everything like that. And yeah, Shinichiro Watanabe obviously does a really amazing job with the series, and it feels like that you're with these characters throughout their journey. You can tell Shinichiro Watanabe does care for these characters and for this universe in general. You can tell that he really cares for these characters and how much research that he has put into the series, and I respect that. The soundtrack for the series is also pretty amazing, and the jazz music is just well awesome. The animation is absolutely impressive, and it looks really good to this day, and it holds up pretty well to this day. And you can tell that Shinichiro Watanabe does a really amazing job with the creative visual style for Cowboy Bebop, not just on the animation, but on the music as well, mixing between jazz and space bounty hunters, space cowboys, and everything like that, mixed between space and western, and space bounty hunters, and of course jazz. And you can tell that Shinichiro Watanabe does an amazing job with the music and how he really cares for this music. You can definitely tell. Everything that you have in this anime is here. Really great character arcs, great character development, story, and everything, including mixing up with genres and everything like that. And also the world building surrounding it, and with the atmosphere, feeling like you're with these characters and you're with their journey. You want to see them overcoming their problems, overcoming their issues, and you want to see them having a happy ending. In reality, they couldn't get a happy ending. And basically, yeah, the main theme about Cowboy Bebop is basically the past and how we wish to change the past. Throughout the atmosphere of the series, it feels like that you're in a room with these characters and that you're with them in the journey. It feels like that you want them to succeed and you want them to overcome their problems, overcome their fears. And at the end of the day, we can't always get a happy ending. And sometimes happy endings don't come true. Carrying a lot of the weight that you're gonna carry. Oh, you're about to get spoiled for the ending, by the way. So if you want to watch the ending, then stop watching this and watch this video for later and just go watch the entire series yourself, including the ending. But if you have seen it, then feel free to say in the video, I guess. Because the ending is just so sad, and it's basically where I cheer for Spike to face his past, but at the same time, I do cry, and it just feels so intense. There's no series finale that I could see with other shows other than this being better, and it was the perfect send-off for Spike's character and the perfect send-off for the series finale, and it's just absolutely tragic. It's just, yeah. In the series finale, Spike gets to meet up with Faye again, but along the way he gets to meet up with Julia one last time. Although tragedy has struck, as Julia dies in the process when Spike was trying to get her out of a situation, but then tragedy struck when she died. And when she died, Spike realizes that he can't run away from his past anymore. So now he has to face his past. He has to overcome his fear by facing his past. And in that, Faye is confronting him about his life and everything like that. And when Spike is leaving, we see Faye crying, and we also see Jet washing down the windows, and it shows about how Jet knows that Spike is not coming back, and Faye is just breaking down into tears. And what I really like is the final battle. The final battle of the series looks pretty awesome. It is well directed, it's well animated, well choreographed, and just everything surrounding it. It just overall looks really cool. And the visuals and the animation is spectacular in this. And the drawings are just amazing as well. And we also see Spike and Shin teaming up, and Shin is basically pointing out where Vicious is, and then Shin dies, and Spike is just sad, and it's just left to tears, and now he has to go and face Vicious. And whenever we see Vicious and Spike fighting, it's just so sad, and it's just, you are cheering for Spike, that you want him to face Vicious and you want him to overcome the past, but in the end, it's just going to be very sad, because it's foreshadowing about how Spike is going to probably die. It's also pretty much intense, as if like you're in the room and you feel like that you're just horrified seeing, and at the same time you're also kind of feeling sad seeing what is about to happen in front of your eyes. And this is one of Spike's last words.
Bang.
The final is also pretty intense as well. I mean, you can tell the intensity. You can tell that it's just so intense and yet so emotional. And especially where Spike is supposedly died, it's basically shocking. Although that's up for the viewer's point of view to decide, as in an interview with Shinichiro Watanabe, he said that he didn't mean it that way, but it's up for the viewer's perspective, their point of view, to decide whether or not Spike is still alive or Spike is dead. Shinichiro Watanabe will later use the same formula that he used from Cowboy Bebop into other shows like Samurai Champloo and Space Dandy, which I will talk about those shows at some point in the near future. I am also aware of Cowboy Bebop the movie, which I will talk about that in my underrated film reviews. I will talk about that in another video. And I am also aware of the god-awful live-action Cowboy Bebop Netflix series, in which I am not going to do a review about it, and I refuse to do a review about it, and I refuse to talk about it, mainly because how god-awful it is. And as we all know, anime to live-action adaptations don't work that well. I mean, just take a look with Death Note or Dragon Ball Evolution, or take a look with probably the god-awful live-action One Piece series. Shinichiro Watanabe obviously does a really amazing job with the developing of these characters and also the atmosphere of the series and just the world building surrounding this series and everything that has been going through, especially with the storytelling and telling standalone stories in different genres to give time to develop on the characters. And I also like the perspective of Spike Spiegel, especially how we see the flashbacks of his past through his fake eye. I mean, if you rewatch episode 5 correctly, you see the reflection of his fake eye, and you see the flashbacks of his past life before the events of the series. You see him being friends with Vicious, and you see him with Julia. You see that his fake eye is a metaphor about his past, where one eye he could see the present, but it's kind of dead inside, and the other is sort of dead inside, but at the same time, he still sees the past. And this is clever writing from Shinichiro Watanabe, the creator of the series. Shinichiro Watanabe is by far one of my favorite anime directors and one of my favorite anime creators, and just one of my favorite artists in general. And basically, yeah, I like him more than Hayao Miyazaki, and he's like the Quentin Tarantino of anime, and you can tell that Cowboy Bebop has like this Quentin Tarantino feel to it. It definitely has that Quentin Tarantino feel to it, while at the same time mixing with sci-fi like with Star Wars. And they did a really amazing job with the mix between bounty hunters and space cowboys and jazz. And they did a really amazing job with that. And they also did an amazing job with developing on these characters. And overall, just amazing. If you haven't seen this show, I highly encourage you to go see the anime. Go watch it, especially with the English dub. The English dub is by far superior, and Shinichiro Watanabe did say that he preferred the English dub of Cowboy Bebop more than the Japanese dub. I'm pretty sure that he kept in mind for the American audiences as well, as he prefers the English dub of Cowboy Bebop over the original Japanese dub, and is saying that that is the definitive version of Bebop over the Japanese dub, aka the English sub. People have been debating or not whether that English dubs or English subs are better. I like both. There's nothing wrong with liking both. I see many talented voice actors that I met from convention centers putting their impression, putting unique emphasis on the characters that they were playing, and especially for people who are trying to translate accurately to anime from Japanese dubs for the English dubs, you see that they are trying to do the best that they can, and are trying to fit every line from the mouth movements that they have, and you can tell that it's pretty hard work, because English translates to English dubs are sometimes pretty hard, especially with some voice actors as well. By the end of the series, you feel like that you went through a roller coaster ride of emotions, just like with how you experienced with Return of the Jedi. And if you haven't seen this show, if you're an anime fan that is trying to look for a really good show, or if you're just a guy who's trying to look for another really good show to watch, or a Quentin Tarantino fan who is trying to look for something Quentin Tarantino aspiring like, I highly recommend this series. I highly recommend you give it a watch, as this series is by far really good, especially for the English dub. It is superior to all English dubs I've seen throughout anime, and is by far the best English dub out there. And I recommend that you see the English dub. You watch the English dub. I recommend you watch the English dub. Go see it. It's amazing. I highly recommend that you give this show a watch. This show is a must-watch. Go see it. It's amazing. I remember getting into the series when I first saw it on Cartoon Network's late adults block, Adult Swim, when I think I was just only about 6 or 7, probably, or 5 years old. And then I remember rewatching this series again when I was in high school, when I rewatched it again on Toonami Adult Swim, and it's currently airing on Toonami Adult Swim. Who would have thought me, a young kid back then, would end up enjoying Cowboy Bebop, especially now that I'm an adult and rewatching the series again years later. It still manages to hold up well to this day. Anyways, that's all for today's video. I hope you guys like it. If so, like, subscribe, share, and comment. I'll see you all in the next video.